this is so cool, guys. All right, listen up. Oh wait, I'll walk around so they have to find me. Watch, she's gonna have to chase me. Okay, what we're doing today, that's my sign for alcohol. Alcohol awareness. And, I don't want to use names. It's kind of like when I talk about hospitals. I don't like to say AGH did it or West Penn did it or whatever, because we have great health care. So I don't want to use names, but for the alcohol awareness, I wanted to tell a story, okay? Because I think this story gives you all the ups and downs of alcohol and what it's all about and what it can do to you and how you have to protect yourself or you can end up in a big problem, okay? So this story takes us from 1888 to 2021. Okay? I'm setting it up so that, again, it's alcohol awareness. That's the whole thing. When you're done with today, I think you're going to see how alcohol, which again is classified as a drug, keep that in mind, so that how this drug of alcohol has permeated the world, not just Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or particularly Swickley, the Masonic Village, but the permeation is incredible. And what I'm going to share with you is a story. And at the end of the story, you'll see how some people drank alcohol, and a lot of it, for many, many years, and they suffered no consequences. But I was fortunate enough to have conversations with those people, and tremendous consequences that no one saw. Does everybody follow me? And then I tell you a story about, the good way to set this up is wealth, okay? So we'll put increased income, decreased income, okay? And what is interesting statistically, these people that have alcohol, let's just say in their system, usually do fine. These that have alcohol in their system don't fare so well. Okay, so everybody follow that. So as we go through this story, again, this is alcohol awareness. So I want to bring an awareness to all those that hear that it is a drug and it has an effect. And when I run through that, which I do next, I think everybody will get a better perspective of what it does to your body, okay? I'm bringing it up from the social aspect, the cost aspect, and then ultimately what I'm sharing with you in this story is personal experiences and what, let's just say it's not what it appears to be. As I told you, at the end of this person's life, what appeared to be was wonderful, but really what was there was severe depression, okay? And we'll get into all that, how it happens with the alcohol. So everybody follow me? Good, put your tennis shoes on. This is gonna be a good one, guys. All right, so to tell the story, France, Greece, Italy. Importer, exporter. Again, 1888. Female and male. Why am I doing that? When they measure standards of alcohol and effects of alcohol, they came up with a safe range. Well, what does that mean? There's no alcohol, mild use, moderate use, severe use. So what statistics I'm going to give you are moderate use. Again, personal story, so personal opinion, is because the lobbies still wanted to make sure the people that made alcohol and sold alcohol, so that's why they put it in under moderate. Does everybody follow me? But moderate leads to disease. So if you're in the moderate range, it can still cause disease. But you'll read in all the literature that this is okay. Does everybody follow that? All right, so what is the moderate range for males? Male can have 12 drinks a week. A female can have 7. And you say, why is that? Unfortunately or fortunately, there's more fat cells in a woman's body, and that's where the alcohol hangs out. And so what happens is that you can end up in situations of intoxications and other, let's say, social issues if you consume more than that. And again, remember what I said that was, moderate. So this range of 12 drinks a week and 7 drinks a week is moderate alcohol use. Does everybody follow me? All right. This company was in a small town. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard the term, that's train tracks. Have you ever heard the term, well, they're on the other side of the train tracks. They live on the other side of the train tracks. Everybody's with me? All right, so on the other side of this track was a less wealthy, let's just say this person, and I'll give you the history so you can appreciate it. This person on the less wealthy side was one of 12 children, and he shined shoes at the age of 4. And he shined Mr. Bryce's shoes, so Mr. Bryce hired him in the glass factory. And he claims that it was 120 degrees in there, and that's why he never got taller than 5 foot. Okay? But the point comes back to when you're at that age on the streets of a small town, you get to know everything. And in that process, let's just say alcohol was the mainstay until it wasn't allowed anymore, okay? And we all remember that legislation that stopped any alcohol, all right? Well, this particular person in that process saw that alcohol could make him money. And so he paid attention to what was going on. This particular person ended up marrying the daughter of this particular person, and the fallout was she was disowned from the family. And over a period of time, the family got together very frequently, and this person sat at the head of the table with lawyers, doctors, etc. on a regular basis. And what I found and what I saw over that period of time was he invited alcohol for everybody, but he didn't drink it. And I often wondered why, and this is why. Sugar. What does sugar cause? Inflammation. And here's what he got me with. It's a dehydrogenase. It's called aldehyde. And that breaks down the alcohol. What's the alcohol break down to? Vinegar. And he made me drink vinegar. And he said, here, taste this. And I go, I tasted on the salad, Pap, it's sour. And he goes, taste it. So I went, and as I went like this, he made me drink some, you know, and it almost caused me to puke. And it was amazing because he said to me, he goes, that's why I don't drink it. I sell it. And I thought to myself, wow. And I was young, because I didn't understand all these people, and he sat at the head of the table. Well, as it turned out, during the Prohibition, he made moonshine. And ironically, the story is that when he and my grandmother got married, she was disowned from the family. Well, there was a little bit of a problem, and he was selling moonshine to the judge, and let's say everything got taken care of. Okay? So back to, you have to understand this, guys, the byproduct of alcohol after the liver metabolizes it. Am I spelling vinegar right? Close enough, see? And even though I knew this, and I'll go through this with the story, even though I knew this, like, because I was young, let's see, how old would I have been? I'd have been 8 or 9, and he made me drink the vinegar. And I remember thinking, like, who would drink that? And he said, talk to your uncle, who's a chemist. And again, I'm 9 years old, and he's teaching me that those in the know are in the know. Those that aren't in the know follow. And as he shared all that with me, I just kept it back there. And that's why, again, this is alcohol awareness. And I'm setting this up so everybody sees what happens. So I have a grandfather that made moonshine during the Prohibition and sold it, and had the holidays at his house all the time, and the whole family. I'm talking 140 people. That's how many of us were there. He had, I told you, there was 12 in his family. In fact, I remember Uncle Mike, who had 11 kids. When my grandfather died, I made an announcement to him. I said, hey, anybody related to Uncle Mike, step out for a minute so someone else can come in. Because that's how many people there were. But the point is, what happened, he taught me that the byproduct being vinegar has effects in the body. Okay, we swallow, esophagus, comes down to the stomach. Then it makes its way, this is the liver. This is the pancreas, I'll put that in dots. Pancreas, okay. Over here is the spleen. So what happens? You drink the alcohol, it makes its way to the liver. That enzyme changes it into vinegar. 30 seconds after you take a drink of alcohol, 30 seconds, vinegar's in your bloodstream. So everybody follow me what I'm telling you, okay? Vinegar is circulating in your bloodstream. Does anybody here think that's a good thing? What is it going to do? It's going to cause inflammation. Where? It's in the bloodstream. If something gets in the bloodstream, where does it go? Everywhere. Does everybody follow me? Okay, so you now know that there's a chemical, and this chemical, the byproduct of it is vinegar. And the science also shows that you can only metabolize that alcohol half an ounce every hour. Is everybody with me? So if it's getting in your system and in 30 seconds it's converted to vinegar and you gotta wait an hour till your liver metabolizes it, then that vinegar is circulating in your system. Does everybody follow what I'm telling you? This is important to understand, guys. And again, this is awareness. That's why I get to tell you everything, because this isn't a medical talk that I have to talk out of the book, but I can share with you what I've witnessed over my lifetime and the effects of the alcohol that it had on my family. And ultimately, with where we are right now, it's the awareness. Please have the awareness. Okay, so back to, this is the physiology, and we'll go back to this the whole time we go to the story. So within 30 seconds, vinegar is circulating in your bloodstream. Okay? What's the main thing that we worry about that it causes? Inflammation. Is inflammation good? No. Okay? That's what causes all the trouble. So back to, what does it affect? Everything. Everything. Moderate amounts is what they do the studies on. And remember what we said, moderate amount, male 12, woman 7. So in a week, if you consume, as a female, 7, what are the drinks? Beer, up to 7% alcohol, wine, up to 12%, and then spirits, that's what they put on. Why do you think my grandfather made so much money selling moonshine? It was 100 proof. You follow me? So that got you the most thrill for the drill. All right? So spirits can go from 40% to 100%. Anybody ever seen pure grain alcohol? It's amazing stuff, guys. You can see, like if you have light shining in, my grandfather used to do that when we were little to show us. Light shining in the window, and you open up a bottle of pure alcohol, you see the vapor. Like you see, and he would say, do you think you want to put vinegar in that in your body? Okay? All right, so here we go, understanding now, once it gets into the system, what's around here? That's the powerhouse of energy. What does that mean? What are the organs again? Liver, pancreas, spleen. Okay? You see where they are in the body. I'm just putting them there so you understand. This is the aorta coming down your body. Off the aorta, superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, and middle cerebral. These are the arteries that supply everything in your belly. I get to tell you a lot of stories when I talk about this. I was a medical student working at Hammett Medical Center, and Dr. Starzl came up to take a liver. And I did the case with him. And at the end of the case, he's taking his gloves off, and he says, so what's a kid from Pittsburgh doing in Erie? And I said, you haven't hired me yet. And he hired me. And so I got to go with him for baby Tabitha. This would have been back in 1980, probably about 83. And we thought that the advancement was going to be take everything and get back to Presby. So we went in, we cut all the arteries, and took everything that was inside back to Pitt. And in the meantime, what came up was what was called a preservation solution. So a whole long story, we'll talk about that some other day. But back to, this is the powerhouse. What's the spleen do? Immune system. It handles your immune system. What does the pancreas do? Everything. Is everybody with me? Everything. If you take a sip of water, what does it produce? Acid to balance it. You eat a piece of meat, what does it do? Puts out trypsin to digest it. You have some sugar, what's it put out? Insulin to get the sugar. Everybody with me? So anything you put past your tongue, the pancreas is working. Everybody understands that. What does the liver do? Everything. Okay? Understand this, guys. You have to understand it. There you go. Okay, so we all understand this part. What's important now, I'll draw the liver like this. We'll draw the pancreas in dots, and we'll draw the spleen as like a big circle. We'll put an S on that. All right, behind where you swallow, we have the aorta. All right, does everybody follow me? Around the aorta, what do you have in here? Small intestine. So I'll put SI. And remember we talked about it. My intestine can go out to George and back. You follow it? And it's all kind of rolled in a way, especially so it can absorb things. All right? So what happens from the small intestine? Everything. What? Everything goes to the portal vein. What does the portal vein do? Takes everything back to the liver. Does everybody understand that? So you can't fool Mother Nature. You can't change this. It happens, except for 2 cases. Sublingual and rectal. What does that mean? Bypasses the liver. So if you take it sublingual or say an enema, then it gets directly to the liver. Why do I know that? I was in a fraternity house, and when the 12 brothers that were living there ran out of beer, if you took 1 beer and an eyedropper, you could get 12 people inebriated. Does everybody follow me? So this is the anatomy of your body. Anything you eat is going to get to the small intestine, and everything from the small intestine through the portal vein gets to the liver. Okay, we're going to come back to this picture because what's called portal hypertension that causes you to bleed, what they call esophageal varices, that's what this comes from. So we'll come back to this. What I'm trying to make sure you understand is vinegar, within 30 seconds of the drink, circulates through your bloodstream. It has an effect on your liver, pancreas, and spleen. And remember what I'm telling you, moderate alcohol is 12 and 7 per week. And that's where the data comes from. Now, if your genetic makeup, you have a certain gene that the liver can detoxify the fastest, then you're lucky because you can metabolize and get it out of your system faster. If you don't have that gene, then it hangs around longer. And what do we talk about? Half an ounce of the 40%, or the spirits as it will, 40% of that alcohol has now turned to vinegar, and as it's traveling through your system, half an ounce every hour. So if you had 1 shot, it's 2 hours before your liver catches up. Does everybody understand that? What does the liver do? Everything. What happens to the liver when it's metabolizing alcohol? It stops doing everything else. So we know the liver does everything. We know it's got all the blood coming from the small intestine, so anything you ate, drank, or put past your lips are going there. And all of a sudden alcohol shows up, and it preferentially metabolizes the alcohol. And what occurs? Everything else you just ate. So if it was a high fatty diet, all that fat circulating, everybody's with me? And what do we see now more in America than we ever seen? Fatty liver disease. Does everybody follow the concept? Understand this concept, guys. It's really important. All right, now, we catch up. I'm just making my mark. Back to the story. Has anybody ever watched a football game, baseball game, hockey game, soccer game, and not seen a beer commercial? Right? Okay. All right, so back to the story. So I witnessed the effects of alcohol on 50 people. And of those 50 people, they were fortunate enough to be in the enough wealth situation. And those 50 people consumed more than moderate alcohol, okay? And what I watched over the course of their lifetime was unique because my grandfather didn't drink it till he retired. And then when he retired, he had a great system. It was wonderful. Ever heard of muscatel? That's like the most strong alcohol content in wine. So he had a bottle of muscatel in the refrigerator, and then the other bottle of muscatel had water in it. And so he'd leave from what he was doing, and he'd go in, and his cup always was colored. You couldn't see what was in it. And he'd pour what we all thought was water, and it wasn't water, okay? And as he got older, and I asked him, you didn't do this all that time. Why are you doing it now? And he says, I'm retired. And I said, well, what's the difference? And he goes, I don't think the vinegar will taste as bad. Okay, so back to, I observed, I'm going to use personal brother, uncle, and aunt, just to make sure of the male, female, and the amount of alcohol. And believe it or not, what was remarkable, all three were in business. And what was unique about the business part was it was okay to drink, that you were doing business. And so they would take a customer out to dinner or out to lunch, and they would have a couple drinks, okay? Well, remember, moderate is 12 in a week. When you pass up that moderate, now you're into severe alcohol ingestion, all right? So everybody understands that, and this, by the way, uncle, aunt, my brother was same age as I am. We were like 16, 18 months apart, and aunt and uncle would have been, let's just say, in their 70s when I'm going to talk about this, okay? So I'm bringing it up just to show how things can happen and what occurs. So let me use uncle, 74. Alcohol use was greater than moderate. Business, put meetings and dinners, plus club. They belong to the country club, okay? And so what was interesting is my grandfather got me to go to one of the meetings, and I was amazed. It was amazing. Bottles of wine on the table. Like the waitress came around, took everybody's orders as soon as they walked in the door. And the people that were doing the business did that to get the people comfortable to make the purchase, okay? That was what was explained to me by my grandfather, all right? And so I watched this, I saw what it was all about. With my aunt, she had a beauty shop. And what was interesting was, she said a lot of it was for the business. You know, that she would have different functions, and so all of her customers, I guess you would call them, would be able to participate, and that's how she got new customers. And so she was over the moderate range, and once again, I think she was 72. Okay, my brother, I have to tell you a funny story, you appreciate this. So I was in practice 3 years. I was renting space from the hospital. And my father was a professional singer. And some of the guys he sang with had a building in Bellevue. And they said to him, hey, Matt, you want to buy the building? So my father says, yeah. Sorry, guys, that's my booking. So my father said, sure. So my father, my brother, and I went to buy this building. So my brother was never on time. So my father and I were on the phone with the people we were purchasing it from. And long story short, at the end of it, they wanted $75,000 down cash, okay? So we hang up the phone, my father and I are talking. I have 6 kids, he has 6 kids. At the time, my younger brother and sister, who are 12 and 13 years younger than me, were in college. You know, I was paying for private school. So we both decided, like, you know, we're not gonna do this. So we're about to call the guy. My father's about to call the guy, and we hear the door open. It's my brother. And it's like, hey, it's about time you get here. So he sits down, and my father gives him the whole scoop. And he goes, and they want $75,000 cash down payment. And my brother goes, let's do it. And my father goes, you got $75,000 cash? He goes, yeah. Like he laughed at him. So the process that I saw him get into and the money that was involved in the business of keeping all that running was where the alcohol came from. And again, what happened and why I bring him up, 59 years old, had a stroke related to the alcohol, and he passed. And I always go back to my grandfather talking about the vinegar. But I have to share the story because I told you this is alcohol awareness. You have to be aware of how it can all happen. My grandfather's family had they used to call it a beer garden, a butcher shop, and a general store. And every Sunday would drop my grandmother and her sisters off to church, and then we'd go down and see my grandmother. And I loved it and I hated it. She always pinched my cheeks, so I hated that. But I loved it because she was always cooking something for us. So my grandfather would go first, right, up the steps. My brother Tony would grab the glasses from the night, everybody left at 2 in the morning and we're there at 7 a.m. And he would drink. I was probably 6, so he's 4.5 to 5, and drinking those glasses. Does everybody follow me? And I have to admit, like, he was so funny that I tried it. I ended up puking and they took me to the hospital and all that kind of stuff and kept me away from it. But the reason I bring it up is exposure to alcohol and it's okay is seen at a very, very early age. Does everybody follow me? My 3-year-old granddaughter was at the house we did Easter a week later because I have 3 that are married and they always go to the in-laws. So we're sitting at the table. I put 3 ears of corn. She has 1. She goes, Pappy, why do you have 3 and I only get 1? And I said, because I'm Pappy, right? About 10 minutes later, she said, why don't you have alcohol and they're all drinking something? She didn't say alcohol, she said beer. And I said, I'm working. Yeah, that was my excuse. But 3-year-old observes everything that's going on. And they see the exposure at an early age. Okay, why do I bring this up, the stroke and what happened? First thing you see is the blood count changes. The platelets go down. Why? Remember what we said? Liver, pancreas, spleen. What happens when that portal vein goes to a cirrhotic liver? Everything backs up. So the pressures go up. What happens? Spleen gets bigger. It consumes or stores the platelets. Everybody understand that? So despite seeing blood count changes and warnings, I found my 59-year-old brother couldn't stop. In fact, we all had an intervention, and the next day we saw him, he had a shirt that said, what did he call it? I forget the word that it was on, the first word. Intervention. Intervention is for quitters. As if he didn't want to quit, he didn't want the intervention. So we as a family thought, this has been his whole life, this has been what he's done. We'll have another attempt and talk about health. Decided against it, and like I said, guys, 59 years old is too young. He left 2 daughters and 6 grandchildren. I'll go with, we'll just say 70s. Uncle, loss of job. And let's just say mistake with the aunt. Would she have lost her job? Yes. Why didn't she? She owned the company. Okay? The awareness I want everybody to understand is that it's everywhere, it starts young, and it's okay. All right? Let me do that again. It's everywhere, it starts young, and it's okay. And what I'm sharing with you is a personal experience because of what I've watched. And by the way, my grandfather lived to 94 years old, and he passed away. It's kind of unique how life goes. I was doing a project, and long story short, we had the same name. And the amount of money that the project gave me, when I showed it to him, he saw his name and that amount of money. And he always used to put his fingers up under his arm like this. He goes, well, I'm Matt Coppola, right? And I said, yeah. And I left him that night, and he died. And for me, with what I watched him go through, the stories he told me, and as I watched, he was probably, I'd say, 66, 67 before he started drinking. Again, when he was a kid he did, and then he quit. And he died peacefully, and as I watched what he did, he paid attention to his body, and he paid attention to what he knew the effects were. And again, like I said, there were docs in the family. And he was, like I'd sit there at the table and he'd ask questions just to hear from the doctors the effects. So let's go through the effects. I wanted to give you the story, guys, because it's an awareness. And my thoughts on the whole process and why I do it this way is to make you aware everybody knows somebody that drinks more alcohol than they need to drink. And if you could have an impact on them, the one thing, like I said, that got me was my grandfather telling me it was vinegar, and then he made me drink some. And you think of that traveling through your system, because the byproduct, the first reaction, it's vinegar traveling through your system. So what does the vinegar cause? Inflammation. Abbreviation, you guys all know that's inflammation. All right, so back to brain. Start there. What do we know about alcohol in the brain? Look it up. Wernicke's-Korsakoff syndrome. What does that mean? That means that the alcohol inflammation that's been studied over years shows that a particular part of the brain, which ironically is located near the memory centers, when it gets inflamed, that inflammation can lead to, and why they call it a syndrome, there's different effects. The term is confabulation. You'll talk to somebody and they can hide being demented. How do they hide it? It's called confabulation. They just keep talking, and they'll change the subject periodically. Like, what's the year? Oh yeah, it was a great year last year. Everything, hey, Pirates won this and the Steelers, like that's, they talk around it, okay? But the point still comes back to, that's one of the places that the inflammation hits, and over a period of time, that inflammation can cause trouble. Where do we see the intoxication? What's intoxication? Brain. We say that it disinhibits. What's that mean? That means if a person is usually quiet, sometimes they get boisterous. I'm just scribble, guys, because I can't spell it fast. All right? So we know that the alcohol gets into the bloodstream in 30 seconds. We know that moderate 12 and 7 has an effect of inflammation in the body, can affect the spleen, the liver, and the pancreas regularly because that vinegar is circulating. So with that occurring, recognize inflammation in those areas. What happens when there's inflammation in the liver? It's called hepatitis. We're talking about alcohol, but viral hepatitis is probably the most common. With the alcohol, the liver gets inflamed, and then what happens? Instead of that half an ounce, it's not metabolizing a half ounce, maybe a quarter ounce. And then over time, what's unique about the liver, I'll say it's very juicy. What does that mean? The way that the cells are set up, there's a lot of space for blood to flow and then cellular activity. If inflammation occurs, there's scarring. Once it scars, it gets smaller and it's not as juicy and distensible, and that's where you run into trouble with the cirrhosis because everything backs up in terms of the pressures. Everybody with me? Pancreas, what happens? Pancreas gets inflamed, called pancreatitis. What happens with pancreatitis? Pancreatitis is the only organ in the body that doesn't have something. What doesn't it have? That's probably, go with just the silver part. That's probably how big the pancreas is. And then it has a tail on it. And once again, what does it do? Everything. Anything that goes past your lips, it has a response. Everything, it has a response. So what occurs when it gets inflamed? The duct that lets all of the secretions out to metabolize normally gets blocked from the inflammation. Why? It's the only organ in the body without a covering. So there's no covering over the pancreas. It just sits there in the middle of your abdomen. And so now it's inflamed, and as it's trying to secrete what? Everything. It gets backed up, and what does it do? It starts to eat itself. Does everybody follow me? Like the chymotrypsin and the trypsin that break up the steak you just ate. Well, when that gets secreted and it's staying in the pancreas, it starts to take away the pancreas. Does everybody understand the concept? And what can happen is you can get a blockage of the artery. It's called necrosis. So you can get necrosis from it. When I started in practice, the only way to do anything about it was called a Whipple procedure. And the Whipple procedure, you were lucky if you had a 25% survival rate. It was a tough procedure. Now, thanks to technology, phenomenal what they can do. I'm not telling anybody to drink to get pancreatitis. I'm just saying it's phenomenal what can be done. I had a patient that probably 75% of her pancreas was necrotic. And there was a guy over at Presby, he has since left, but he went in with the scope and he did the procedure, you know, through just with the tools that they use nowadays. And he went in, took it out. She's 84 years old and very independent. So it's not a death sentence, but it's definitely happening from the inflammation. And remember the vinegar. You know, so if you're moderately drinking, the data shows that it happens. Now, what can you do to help? Eat food, they say, is a good protection. Why do you have to have fluid? If you drink alcohol, when you drink alcohol, it's a diuretic because it has an effect hormonally to shut off the anti-diuretic component of your body. So what will happen is you may go a period of time, but then all of a sudden you urinate a lot. And that's dehydration. Is inflammation and dehydration a good thing? No. So please keep well hydrated. If you're gonna have, the rule of thumb is if you're drinking a beer, wine, or spirits, drink an 8-ounce glass of water after or before each one. Two things it does. That water dilutes everything, so it helps to be less vinegar traveling through the system, if you will. And the other thing that it helps is everything's pressurized in your body. So when you get dehydrated, the pressure goes up. As you add that water, it balances it out. Everybody with me? Spleen, that's the big one, guys. What happens with the spleen? That's the autoimmune. What do we mean by autoimmune? It makes all the cells that protect you. I like to think of the spleen. Put it over here. That's your army. It kills anything that's not supposed to be there, okay? What happens when it gets inflamed? Remember we used to talk about phagocytosis and Pac-Man? Okay, you guys remember the Pac-Man game? It went and gobbled up whatever that was there. Well, that's called phagocytosis in the body. So in the body, when you have an inflamed situation, the way the body, like say you get a scab and it looks terrible, and then all of a sudden you look down and it's normal skin again. What happens is that's the inflammatory response. You don't want that occurring in your spleen, and it does. Does everybody follow me? So if you have the consumption of alcohol that leads to an increase in pressure called portal hypertension, spleen gets larger, pancreas gets more blood but becomes less effective, liver less effective. What does it do? Remember we talked about the small intestine and the portal vein. Where does all the blood flow? Remember the artery brings the blood, the vein brings it back. So all the blood going to the whole body and specifically the abdomen, if these pressures get high, everything backs up. So what we find is, see if I can draw the circles. This is the esophagus. What happens with the esophagus, those blood vessels dilate. And let's say you eat some food that's kind of, the consistency is hard. You know, say fried chicken. And as you swallow that, it nicks one of those blood vessels. Big bleeding can occur. And if it gets real bad, what they do is it's called a TIPS procedure, where what they do is lessen the pressure by draining it into your body system, into the abdomen and or into the leg. And again, that's what happens when the patient gets to the point where the pressures have gotten high and they're having side effects from the pressures, but they can't get off the alcohol. And so what you look at is the only cure is a liver transplant. Another personal story, roommate from college. Crazy situation. He became a doctor, got sued for what he thought was crazy. He became a lawyer and opened up his own home care agency. Same thing, the business. Taking people out, start drinking more, and unfortunately, he didn't have the right enzyme. He had to be off alcohol for 1 year before he could get a liver transplant. Does everybody follow me? All right, so the awareness of the alcohol. Alcohol awareness. This is the month. Wonder why? Spring? Either way, what I want everybody to be aware of with the alcohol is that the negative effects, I'll just put negative. Remember I told you I was exposed to a lot of different people, and when you saw them at holidays, actually we get together in summers, there was a farm and we all got together, and everybody was always happy when they were drinking, okay? And then I had the good fortune, because it was a big family, my parents worked, you would be sent to stay with an aunt or cousin or nephew or whatever. And I witnessed that it always wasn't fun and happiness, that one of the leading causes of depression. And what happens? Drink more. Or add second substance. And what was common, another great story. Anybody ever heard of Fatty Gaddy's restaurant? I went to school, I was trained with Mario Fatty Gaddy. And so he started a alcohol and drug abuse clinic at St. Francis Hospital, 91, maybe 1991. And I had bought a practice at that time. It was a family practice. And this family practitioner gave this particular patient who drank alcohol but had bad depression, and then she got anxious because she was always afraid everybody knew she was drinking. You know, she had all this perfume on and all this stuff all the time. But so what happened, he put her on. Vitamin V. Anybody know what that is? Okay? That was a common treatment. Very common treatment. And so what would happen is you would end up with alcohol, depressant, Valium, depressant. May help the anxiety, but long term can cause complications. Does everybody follow me? Okay? So I had this particular patient, I'll say patient X. So I take over to practice, and she comes in, and at the end of the visit, first time I saw her, she goes, and I'll need my Valium. And I said, I don't write prescriptions for Valium. And she said, what do you mean? I said, you have to see a psychiatrist. And she goes, I don't want to bleepity bleep see a psychiatrist. I've been having this medicine for 30 years. I can't just stop it. And I said, no, you can't. I said, but I'll take care of that. So I go call Mario, and I tell him that she was the 5th patient admitted to this unit, okay? And it was set up to curb your addiction and set you up as an outpatient program. So she's there about 3 weeks, and all of a sudden the place fills up. There's 18 people there. Well, the way the system worked is you earned privileges while you were there. So she was the one that passed out, you know, like the stuff for the day and what was going to go on. So she showed up one day and there was somebody else passing it out, okay? And they had a little conflict. My patient X was 78 years old. The conflict was with an 18-year-old. And Mario called me and said, "Get down here right away. She has her by the back of the head and she's banging her head off the table." And it all came from the withdrawal of the opiate or the benzos as well as the alcohol, okay? So we got to talk about withdrawal. What is withdrawal? Body craving. DTs. Anybody ever heard of those? You can have hallucinations that are visual, shaking, sweating, GI tract stuff. We'll just put stuff. There's a lot of different things that can happen. So, you want to quit, you feel it's best to stop, and you run into this. What happens? You take another drink because it stops it immediately. By taking the alcohol, all those symptoms go away, okay? I'm not defending it, but I'm giving you the awareness piece because a lot of us don't understand why people don't quit. So when you go through withdrawal, it shows your body has built up a tolerance to the alcohol. What does that mean? Well, my brother used to say, so he wouldn't shake. That was the excuse he'd give. But what we realized over time was it gives you a sense of euphoria, let's say, and you're looking for that. And so I'd say about a year before my brother died at Christmas, he opened up the refrigerator door and took out 3 beers. He cracked one and drank that right down and threw it away. Cracked the second one and held them like this as he sat and went down at the table. And as he's drinking the second one, his daughters were coming by. And he'd say, "Hey, grab me a cup of beers." So before we said grace, he had 5 beers that were consumed. And I'm bringing that up to you because it's a telltale sign of tolerance. And if you don't keep the alcohol in the system, you're going to go through withdrawal. And the biggest one, the shakiness. Why can't I spell today? I'll put shake like that, shakiness. That's the one that's most noticeable, okay? It definitely, you can't stop that tremor. You can't stop that shake. And so a lot of people will take that drink to prevent that from happening. And again, that's when you know they're in the tolerant state and going through withdrawal. Okay, another big one here is memory changes. ADLs, activities of daily living, change. What does that mean? That means that instead of you being independent with all the things that you were doing, now you change your way of doing your daily routine so that you can get these things done. And then if someone comes to check on you, you keep them away. Like you tell them, "Oh, no, that house is a mess. I don't want, no, we can't do that yet." And then you find a way to have someone at the house with you to help you out when that person comes to visit, okay? The last thing I'll leave you with, aware. Be aware of youth and be aware, when I put seniors down there, that's over 55 they now say. I can't believe they went that low. And the reason I'm bringing this one up is that alcohol can be hidden very easy. So pay attention to that full gambit. Now, how do you quit? Try and see the results. What does that mean? If you're able to stop and you have no symptoms or side effects whatsoever, no shakiness, no GI tract changes, no problems at all, then it sounds like you're doing fine. Just stay with it, stick with it. I always recommend you talk to somebody. My first experience with it was in 1980. I have a friend, had breakfast with him this morning, as a matter of fact. 1980, he was taking his boat off of his car. He had a brand new Cadillac, and he was drunk. And as he lifted it up, he fell forward, and he scratched the car, and it knocked his bumper off. So the next day, I took him to an AA meeting. Alcohol Anonymous. He now runs 3 of them in Pittsburgh. And I have sent many patients to him because somebody that experiences it is the best person to help somebody. And what happens is you go to these meetings and they're set up 7 days a week. Now the key is finding them. It's not every community, like say Swickley. There might be one in Swickley, but I doubt there's 5 in Swickley. So you just have to know where they're located. But 7 days a week, there are meetings. And I took him to the first one. And it's set up very nice. You go in, you get a cup of coffee. You know, it's kind of like an auditorium. You sit down. No one bothers you at all. Unless you want to talk to somebody. There's people there that you can talk with. And then someone gets up, and they call, these are people that run the meeting. And they get up, pledge allegiance, which is cool. And after they do that, he starts talking about an experience. Similar to what I just told you, and that's part of why I did the lecture this way. When you bring it up in such a way that it's real, the people understand the realness of it and recognize what is going on. And as I stated, remember when I started, it's okay at a moderate level, which can be shown depending upon your genetic makeup, to be detrimental even at a moderate level. One thing I didn't put, that enzyme, if somebody drinks and they get red face or welts, they have a mutation in that enzyme. I have a daughter like that. You know, when she drinks alcohol, you can tell immediately because her face gets red. And then if she drinks too much, then she's miserable, you know, skin reaction, different things like that. But back to an awareness of where it's at in society. Every television runs commercials. And again, guys, I go to the children. You know, make sure you pay attention to the children and what they're seeing. I'm frustrated right now with the energy drinks. I have my own children. I have nieces and nephews, and they're drinking. I mean, it's incredible, guys. Those little 5-hour energy drinks like this. Everybody was just home, like I said, for Easter. And I was taking the garbage out in the morning. Man, there had to be like 40 of those, you know? And I'm telling them, like, this isn't good. You know, it doesn't connect. Like, that's the whole problem. That the internet, the cell phones, the situation that children, even young adults are in, they're constantly bombarded with information. And remember what I told you? My 3-year-old asked why I didn't have a beer. And again, my out was, you know, I'm working. But the point still is, they recognize it at an early age, and the behavior is all okay. Even though, guys, remember what I said? 12 a week for a man and 7 a week for a woman. Remember, 1 beer, it could be up to 16 ounces, 6-7 ounces of wine, and 1 shot of spirits. You know, that's how that works. And you can have 7 of those as a female, 12 of those as a male, and that's the standard. But as I looked up the information, that's moderate consumption. And what the textbook tell you is moderate consumption without proper nutrition and exercise. And oh, and the other good thing is sleep. That was one thing I always thought, all the things my grandfather did, I never understood how he lived that long. And my sister said, he took a nap every day. And he did. Every single day, 12:30, he went up, and don't bother him till 1:45. And then he was fine. And then he went to bed every single night at 7 at night. Of course, he'd get up at 5 in the morning because he was a smoker. He woke everybody up because he was hacking. But back to the point, guys, is please use today what we just talked about as the awareness. And again, the piece that got me when I was younger was that alcohol, it's a dehydrogenase, aldehyde, dehydrogenase, converts it to vinegar. And there's even a byproduct off the vinegar. Guess what that is? Ammonia. That's sugar. And what's the worst part of it? Inflammation. Please take away from today inflammation, liver, pancreas, spleen. Because it'll have an effect on there if the moderate alcohol takes you to the point where there's pressure changes or any effect in your liver. The first thing that'll pop up is fatty liver disease, and then that can spread. So pay attention to it and look at your nutrition as well. They say have a full meal before you drink and water with everyone, and I told you that one already. All right, the one I'll leave you with is the best treatment I've seen so far is called Vivitrol. It's a once-a-month shot. What happens with that once-a-month shot? This Vivitrol stays in the system. It'll actually, it's not as bad as Antabuse, but it's the same concept. Years ago, we used Antabuse, so if you drank any alcohol with the Antabuse, you got sick to your stomach. Vivitrol isn't that bad that it makes you ill, but it definitely, through its effects metabolically, will discourage you from alcohol, and it works. It's expensive. I think most places now, they're doing about $500 a month for the shot, and you got to connect with the doc to get it. I don't do it. My partner, Dr. Jagiello, he's boarded in drug and alcohol rehab. He does it. So I know people that you could talk to. But the bottom line comes down to, guys, it's everywhere. The lobby is huge. What does that mean? That's why it stands at moderate. Like if they had to announce to the American population that you can only have 3 drinks a week if you're a male and 1 for a female, that's prohibition again. That's not going to fly. Okay? And again, guys, like I said, for me, I took you down the personal path to show you it's real. It affects everybody. Someone knows somebody that drinks too much all the time, and the ones that I worry about are the children. Because what I see them seeing that these energy drinks, if you drink one of those energy drinks on top of alcohol, it just creates more havoc on the system, and it makes it so the liver doesn't metabolize the alcohol fast enough. Okay, guys, any questions I'll take? Yes?
So what would be a relatively safe amount of alcohol for a female to have?
Safe? I'd probably go with half of the 7, would be the safe. Or get checked now. Like I think you guys are on the good side of everything. If it hasn't hit you now, you haven't been drinking too much. And I would say to just get checked. We call it liver enzymes. Look at all those. If there's no changes in the liver enzymes and there's no changes in the size of the spleen, then there would not be a problem. And if you've been drinking X, you could probably stay with X if you get that checked and you don't find anything. But it's more for the awareness, guys. That was why when I saw the awareness and I had a couple conversations with some people, I thought I hope it helped to give you the sense of, I told you my brother, he wasn't 5. And I'm talking, a lot of times the end of that glass at the bar, most of it was alcohol. And he downed them regularly. Like every Sunday we went over to see my grandma. And eventually it took his life at 59. But once again, we all thought it was funny. Like it was funny to see kids, that is. My parents didn't know. Okay, any other questions, guys? Good, thanks for having me.